I'm Kathy McGroyan, and I'm here to explain a little bit more about the city that I live in, Johannesburg, otherwise known as Josie. About 4 million years ago, a huge meteor landed about 80 miles from the city, and it created a shockwave so big that it cracked our ridges. We now call them ridges. It cracked the earth open. At the bottom of these ridges and all along the sides, there was gold. 10 centuries ago, this area was used by the San, who were hunter-gatherers. It was a very dry, flat and dusty area. And then, 130 years ago, in 1884, some little Afrikaans farmer called Jan Gerritse Wijnkies discovered gold serendipitously on a farm. The next 10 years, there saw an influx of 100,000 people to this area, and the city of Joburg was born. With that gold rush, there came lots and lots of people from all around the world, Argentinians, Australians, and of course the British, who had already made their way into the Cape, but they decided there's where the gold, and we all came inland. Now, it's quite far from the sea, so in 10 years for a city to be built up, where the people had to come in usually from the harbour of Cape Town, which is 1,000 miles away, or Durban, which is 400 miles away, it's quite a feat. When you think of it, there was no railroads, there was ox wagons and horses. Pretty much not the place for a lady. But the Afrikaans people are a hardy bunch. Of the influential Scotsman to land in Joburg in the gold rush time was one Henry Brown Marshall, otherwise known as H.B. Marshall. Now, he'd been a collier in Scotland, and he had been a manager at one of the signs, which turned out to be quite good because later on he had his own colliery. But when he moved into Joburg, he realised that things were happening in a big time. So him and his British mates made a lot of inroads, no pun, into the city infrastructure, and they bought a whole lot of land. He also married a certain Anna Maria Rissik, whose brother, Johan Rissik, was the acting surveyor general for the Witwatersrand. So that was quite a good connection. She was an Afrikaans lady and was beautiful. She had many suitors that would come to the Rissik house just to really feast their eyes on her beauty. But of course, HB managed to get her hand, and they lived really happily in the Johannesburg affluent society. He bought a whole lot of land, which is now still known as Marshalltown in downtown Joburg, and he decided just 1 month before the government sold their own land, he sold a whole lot of stands in the Marshalltown area. So whether we had inside information, we don't know, but it's all likelihood. He ended up buying gold shares, mining houses, he dabbled with power, and he even opened up his little brewery, which later got sold, and we now know it as SAB Breweries, which might not be standing after this lockdown period. They lived in a country estate there near Melrose on Athol, which currently stands, and the original house was there for quite some time. They lived a very affluent life. He was a very wealthy man, and he had his finger in many pies. HB was the founder of the Rand Club, a men-only elitist club that still stands today, although now they let women in. Unfortunately, he was convinced by 2 men to get involved in the Jameson raid, which, of course, the Jameson raid didn't actually manage, and they all got arrested. He was jailed for 2 years, HB, our dear friend HB, and then he ended up buying his way out by paying a huge big fine of £25,000, and in those days that was a huge amount of money. And then he and his wife Anna went back to Scotland because I think he made a promise to the government that he wasn't going to cause any more trouble, and I think by that time the Boers were beginning to really settle into Joburg and wanted all the Brits out, and because he was a man of influence, he was quite the candidate to get him out. He and his wife Anna and the family returned to go and live in Scotland.